after the destruction of the second base of Mikdash. Um, sorry, after no, he lived after. I'm sorry, after the building of the second base of Mikdash, about 100 years after the building of the second base of Mikdash. So he was quite a few generations after Mordechai, and he is mentioned in Pirkei Avos. But then come the Zugos. What are the Zugos? This is before the Mishnah, and I'll give you the exact year if you want to know the exact year. It goes from I got it for a present, by the way. My wife gave me for a birthday present. My 90th birthday present, okay. Wow. Many, many years ago. Of course, you get up there to laugh at old people. Okay. Yeah, so Shimon HaTzadik lived 310 years before the destruction of the second base of Mikdash. So, in other words, he lived about 100+ years into the building of the second base of Mikdash. It lasted. The second base of Mikdash lasted how long? 420 years. So he was 100 years and 10 years, I guess, into the building after it started. In other words, about 115 years, 20 years after the story of Purim. That's when he lived. Before Hanukkah. He's mentioned in Pirkei Avot, but this tzaddik lived before the whole story with Hanukkah. When did Hanukkah happen? Good no history. Which year did Purim happen, first of all? Who knows? Exactly. We're 5786 right now, right? As far as I know. 5786. Which year did Purim happen? 3404. Some say 05. 3404. That's the story. So how long ago is that? 2,300. No, 2,300. Yeah, 382 years ago. No, a long time ago. 2,380 years ago. How much? When did Hanukkah happen? How much after Purim did Hanukkah happen? Well, Hanukkah happened in 3621. 3404, 3621. 217 years later. So Hanukkah happened in the middle, much smack in the middle of the tenure, the building of the second base on Mikdash. Not at the end, not at the beginning. Now there were Zugos. What are Zugos? They're called rabbi pairs. They were together. They were a duet, a pair of each one had a different function, but they always spoke together and learned together. And they're mentioned in Pirkei Avos. Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi ben Zveda, and you have 4 generations of these Zugos. Most of them, I think, except for the 4th, were before the Hanukkah story. And the final one lived right after the Hanukkah story. And then you have Hillel and Shammai. Shammai and Naphtali were converts. They were the teachers of Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were the first generation of what we call Tanoim, Mishnah teachers, Mishnah sages. They were the ones, of course, to elaborate on the oral Torah and explain what Moshe received from Hashem at Sinai. They it was put into writing much later. It wasn't put into writing right away. It was memorized. Could you imagine to memorize everything you learned? Crazy. But as the exile got worse and worse and worse, people's minds were not working anymore. And they had to write. This is because Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah, is not supposed to be put in writing. There's a reason for that, which I'll explain maybe next time. But to save people's connection to Torah, if Torah will be forgotten, you can't follow every little rule if this is going to cause Torah to be forgotten. So there's a pasuk that says sometimes you have to override a certain halacha to save something bigger. Eis la'asot, the pasuk in Tehillim. Eis la'asot la'Hashem. It's a time to do for Hashem's sake. Heifedu torasecha. You're allowed to disrupt a certain detail in order to win the bigger picture. And that who is the one that actually puts the Mishnah in writing? Rebbe of Yehuda Nasi. He lived about 150 years after the destruction of the second base of Mikdash. Yeah.
So the Mishnah, it means that it's like you said the Tanaim were the ones that started like elaborating on the oral Torah.
Right, but they were very concise. They didn't explain themselves so deeply. And that's why the next group of sages called Amoyim, the Gemara sages, question, what does this Mishnah mean? And they had argued back and forth. You have arguments, what did the Mishnah mean? And sometimes, they don't argue, but each one gives a different explanation what the Mishnah might mean. So, but you have also arguments in the Mishnah too. You have different, the Mishnah will quotes Rabbi so-and-so, like Rabbi Akiva says like this. Rabbi Akiva was from the Mishnah group. Rabbi Akiva says this, and Rabbi Yishmael says that. Rabbi Meir says this, Rabbi Yehuda says that. And it doesn't clarify who we follow. That you have to find out later. And sometimes you have a Mishnah that's anonymous, unanimous maybe, and anonymous, no name. And when there's no name, when the Mishnah has no name, it means that Rebbe, who compiled the Mishnah, he was like the last generation, means this is the halacha. If there's no name, either it means no one argues, or even if there is an argument, Rebbe says, I know what it is. The rule is that this is how you have to follow. So how many generations do you have of Tanoim? Like around 5 or 6 generations. Rebbe being the final of Tanoim. Then you have the Amoraim, and he has it here. Here you have, you can't see it. You have Zugot, then Tanoim. Tanoim begins with Hillel and Shammai. I'll give you the Hillel and Shammai was the first generation. Then you have Rabbi Shimon ben Hillel. Then you have Rabbi Gamliel, the elder, who's the other Rabbi Gamliel. You have Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Gamliel, who's called Shimon again. You have Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, who lived through the Churban. He witnessed the Churban. He lived before and he saw the actual destruction. Then you have Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is now pretty well known. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rashbi. When did they live? After the Churban. They never saw the destruction. They lived about 100 years, 80 years after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's Rebbe. And then you have, of course, another generation. Then the final generation of Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi was called Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, abbreviated as Rebbe. When did Rebbe pass away? He passed away in the year 3950. No, he compiled the Mishnah in the year 3950, and shortly after passed away. 3950 is when the Mishnah was put together and compiled. Then you have the Tanoim. Then you have, the Amoraim. Amorah means the sayers. Omar. What does Omar mean by Yomer? And he said, they say what. Let's talk about the Mishnah. Mishnah means to teach. These are the teachers. The sayers are the next generation. Not the next generation, next group of sages who cannot argue with the Mishnah. They can only explain. They cannot say, well, Rabbi Akiva says this, I say otherwise. No, you can only, unless you find another Mishnah sage, then you can say, but you can follow that Mishnah sage. But you can't decide, I disagree with the Mishnah. So a Gemara sage cannot argue with the Mishnah sage. Later on, the sages after the Gemara, I'm not going to go into detail, wait for next week. You have the Gaonim. Before, this is in between the Gemara and Rashi, the Gaonim. But before the Gaonim, there's also a few generations of rabbis that are least known. Rabbanan Siburai. And the names, you want to hear one of their names? They don't live too long. They didn't last too long. Rav Sama Bar Yehuda, Rav Simona, sounds like a woman's name. Rav Simona is there. And Rav Eina. And they were only like two generations, but that's it. Just 2 generations, 3 generations. Yeah, even less. Yeah, even less. That's a generation and a half. Then you have finally the Gaonim. The Gaonim their period started in the year 590. 590. That's like 500 years before Rashi. So the Gaonim are the group of Gaonim. That's their name, Gaonim. They cannot argue with the Gemara. Gemara can't argue with the Mishnah. They cannot argue with the Gemara. And this lasted 500 years. The famous Gaonim that everyone knows, of course, I'm sure you all know. Rab Hai Gaon, you ever hear of him? No. Rab Shvira Gaon, Rab Sadya Gaon. Sadya Gaon, you heard of him? Sadya Shvira Hai. And the ones, then there's a famous story, Rab Bustanai Gaon. There's a story written about him in English, his whole life. Incredible story. Anyway, then after you have the Gaonim, a long 500 years, you finally have the first generation of Rishonim. Not Rashi was the second generation. The Rif, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Alfasi, lived in the city. Wow. And he was before Rashi. Rashi learned by him. Although Rashi was an Ashkenazi, and Rif was a Sephardi, they met. Rashi was like the first, second generation of Rishonim. After Rashi, you have the well-known ones. You have Rambam, was about 90 years after Rashi, and then you have the Tosfot. Remember on the Gemara on the left side of the page? Tosfot, not one person, it's a whole bunch of relatives of Rashi, his nephews, his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and some others that were living in the time of the Rambam around. Tosfos and the Rambam are pretty close at the same time. How long did this era of Rishonim? Now the Rishonim do not argue with the Gaonim. They usually don't argue with the Gaonim. Sometimes they can. For sure, they cannot argue with the Gemara. Rashi cannot argue with the Gemara. He can find an opinion maybe to say, I hold like this, Gemara says, but he cannot argue with Gemara, just like the Gemara can't argue with the Mishnah. So you have Rishonim, and then you finally have the later Rishonim. How far did the era of Rishonim last? It started in the year, when did it start? It started in the year 990, or actually 1,000, I'm saying, around the year 1,000. And Rashi was born in the year 1040. He was born then. But before he was born, there was a generation prior to him where the group of Tanoim began. Yeah. I'm not Tanoim, I'm Rishonim. And when did it end? When was the era of the Rishonim over? Quite a long time. It lasted all the way until some argue with this book over here, because it all the way up to the beginning of the 15th century, meaning in the late 1400s, 1480, 1490. That's how far the Rishonim went. And you can't argue, Rishonim can argue with each other, but after the Rishonim are over, the Acharonim, so we have Antik Knesset Agdola, Zugos, Tanoim, Ameroim, Rabbanan Siburai, Gaonim, Rishonim, Acharonim. What are we? Achronim. And some people call us Tachtonim, which is not a very, Tachtonim is not a very nice word. But it means that we are the bottom of things. But it does say that the end of generation, the end, the greatest tzaddikim will be at the very end. Well, Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe, of course, they're the ones that this is now going down until it's like you're going further and further and further away from the Beis Hamikdash. Then you go closer and closer and closer to Mashiach. You ever go to the moon? You been to the moon? Huh? You go up, moon in the sky, you go, and then you look, as you get to the moon, what happens? The earth is in the sky. How'd that happen? So we are in the gravity of the magnetic force or gravity pull of the era of Mashiach. As you get closer, you need greater tzaddikim than ever. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov is the one who started Baal Shem Tov. He has the Baal Shem Tov in here. The Alter Rebbe here, does not have the Rebbe, I guess. I don't know. I guess when this book was written, it was before Gimel Tammuz. He doesn't have people that were alive at that time. Listen to it. Here he has Torah Levim, Meksuvim. Then he has Hillel Shammai, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Medrashim. What about Medrash? Who are the authors of the Medrash? The Tanoim. The same ones who were in the Mishnah. The Mishnah sages are also the ones who wrote Medrash, which is, homiletical expedition. These are, it's stories and Gemara stories. A lot of it we've learned. You find also Medrash, which is on every single parsha. You have Medrash. You have, sayings, interesting sayings that have a lot of depth to it.
They wrote it down, or they because
that was also put. Yeah, that was a good question. That was also put in writing.
Right.
Only later on, I think, by Rebbe. I think so. Here, look, on the final line, you have Yosef Karo, Baal Shem Tov, but he has the Vilna Gaon, and then he has the Chafetz Chaim, which is someone who lived, in the early, passed away in the early 20th century. Chafetz Chaim, well known. So it's fine. It's not all about what you think. The Rebbe was very much also for it. Some of the Hasidic groups were like the Bells of the Rebbe was not for it, and the Rebbe convinced him. Came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe convinced him and explained to him why it's not like good old days. It's different. So the Rebbe very much promulgated the learning not only to learn the laws that women have to learn, which obviously is Hilchos Shabbos, all the negative commandments women are mechuyev in, and also many Hasidus, but also even stories in the Gemara, Medrash, even things that are not relevant to halacha should also be learned. Fill your head, fill your mind with Hashem's Torah. It only makes you healthier. So this is the Rebbe Shita too. But there's so much going on out there, so much influence from the outside world that we rather have our minds, even though it was never the case, have your mind preoccupied with Torah. Okay. So I'll give you more details next week about, I want to show you this book. It's a very, very interesting book. I got it for a present, and I don't know if it's in English. I don't look it up. I don't waste time on that. But okay, I want to finish the Gemara, the final page of the Gemara. We got to the story where there's another opinion when Hashem laughs. Either it's the sukkah, the guy will kick down. They'll ask for a mitzvah, give us a mitzvah, it gives them a mitzvah, and it gets very hot. And because of the heat, what happens? They get angry at the heat, they want them to take a shade, and then all of a sudden it gets hot in the sukkah. They ate with it, and they kick the whole thing down. Hashem laughs. He doesn't laugh too often. He's not, entertained by so many things. This makes him laugh. They think they can do a mitzvah. They compare themselves to my Jews. When the Jew leaves, he walks out, and he feels so humble, I didn't deserve the mitzvah. Hashem doesn't, guess he doesn't like my avodah. He walks in, and he's brokenhearted, and he sits in his house, and his head is down. What do? Keep this looking down. Hashem will laugh and see, look at the difference. Look at the difference. These are my people, my yidolach, my kindalach. Another view is that the non-Jews during the era of Mashiach, right as Mashiach is about to unfold, it gets very exciting, and some of the Goyim are going to want to convert. The Gemara says we don't accept such converts, but it's ulterior motive. You want to be Jewish? You know why I want to be Jewish? Because it looks exciting to be Jewish right now. Not going to accept. But there were some Gerim who were self-made Gerim. They didn't go to the rabbi. They just decided to put on tefillin, put on mezuzahs, and put on this and put on that, act like Jews. And they watch it. What does it cost? Asking all the information and just going about doing all the mitzvahs. Then they hear that Gog and Magog, which, by the way, looks very scary. There's going to be someone whose name is Gog. I don't know what that is in the today's times. Of a country called Magog. It's somewhere in the north. It could be Greece, it could be Turkey, it could be Iran, it could be Russia, one of those countries in the north. That's what we know. And they're going to try to attack Israel. And Hashem and the Rebbe, I just heard a speech from the Rebbe about this. And the Rebbe says that Hashem is going to say, Yidden, don't worry. They're all talking in vain. Hashem is going to laugh at the Goyim for talking, the anti-Israel talk, the anti-Semitic Israel talk. The IDF are a bunch of Nazis. The IDF are a bunch of committing genocide. All that is going to happen right before Mashiach comes, and Mashiach and Hashem is going to sit and laugh at them. Look at the second chapter of Tehillim. Lama ragshu goyim. Why are goyim? They're empty, vain talk against my land, the land of Israel. Jews will be very scared. Hashem says, "Don't worry. You're not going to be. It's not going to affect you one bit. They're going to have problems. I'm taking my revenge on them for all the things they did to you over the many centuries. You're not going to suffer." But before they find out how Gog and Magog are going to be defeated, Gog and Magog tells these Gerim, as these converts, ask Gog, what are you fighting for? We're fighting, we're going to destroy Israel. Oh, really? Take off its tefillin, take off its tzitzis. We're not Jews. They got scared. And Hashem laughs, as if you were Jews until now. So Hashem laughs. So there's another time where Hashem laughs. Okay. And the Gemara brings a proof that they will tear off all their strings and all their laces, meaning the tefillin and the tzitzis. So strings of tzitzis. They'll take them off, put all them off. We're back to being the way we were before. We're going back to our previous religion. That's where we're up to. Now I want to go a little further. And the Gemara just said that Hashem never laughs. So the Gemara is going to ask a question. We do find he laughs every single day. He's playful. And the Gemara gives a whole list of Hashem's, what he does the whole day and the whole night. Well, imagine if you're God, what are you doing all day? Cute. So you tell your cousin, you know what Hashem does every day. Okay, when you get married. Um, take a look at the page. Hold on a second. Which page is it? Yeah, 3B2. You see this? Page 3B2. So when you got the copy here, it's not the first page, of course, not the second page. It is. I'll tell you which page it is. It really came out bad. Okay. It's over here. It's the page that it didn't come out well, and it's on the left side of the page where it says the Gemara challenges Rabbi Yitzchak's statement. Rabbi Yitzchak is the one who said that Hashem never laughs, never once. And the Gemara, you have it? Yeah. It's the next to the last page. It says B3B2 on it, or page 7. Amy, is it true? Is that so? That Hashem never laughs? That there's never laughter in the presence of Hashem except for one day? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said the name of Rav. These are Gemara sages. Rav Yehuda, oh, by the way, well, good to know. Whenever it says Rav and not Rebbe, you don't have it? Well, who doesn't have? I have. Anyone doesn't have, I have extra copies here. Get out of it. Whoever doesn't have the extra copies here, let's go by. Whenever you have Rav, whenever it says Rav and not Rebbe, it's an Amora, it's a Gemara sage. If it says Rebbe, it's usually a Mishnah sage. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav. Well, it says Amar, yeah. What did he say? Says the following. Hashem is delving deep into Torah. What does that mean? He needs to chazer, he needs to review, he needs to go deeper. He has all the depth in the world. He's endless. So what does it mean he learns? It means he invests himself in the Torah so that when we learn, we'll sense divinity in the Torah we learn. Hashem occupies himself in the first 3 hours of the day to put his whole essence and holiness and divinity in the Torah, that when a Jew learns, especially in those hours, he will sense more than just logic of the Torah. He will sense something very holy and very pleasurable. Hashem's tainuk, Hashem's delight is revealed during those 3 hours. That's what it says. And why the first 3 hours? It's a long story, but this is what the Gemara says. So the first 3 hours, he's involved in Torah learning, which tells us that we should start our day also with Torah learning. Second 3 hours, Shniot, during the second 3 hours, Shniot means the second 3 hours, Yoshev Vidan Eskola Olam Kulo. He sits and judges the entire world, but pretty severely. He judges the world. So it's like us going out in our business. After we learn, we daven, we learn, then we go to business, we go to our stores or whatever. Hashem goes to business, he deals with the world, and he judges very, very tightly. Al Pidin. He's not compassionate yet. Kibon Sharoa, Shineschayev Ha'olam Kaloya. Once he sees that the world is deserving of annihilation, God forbid, based on his harsh judgment, the world can't stand. No one can really live up to that, that perfect judgment of Hashem. So he changes and he stands from the Kisei Hadin and sits on the Kisei Harachamim. Why does he not sit on the Kisei? He knows in advance that it's not going to work. So why does he judge us first? Why the first judging us, and then the next 3 hours we'll see, he goes from the Kisei Din to Kisei Rachamim. The answer is because he wants to show what really you deserve, but because of his Rachamanos, his compassion, you're not going to get what you really deserve. So Hashem wants to show what the letter of a law is kach v'kach. But I'm going to have compassion. Some say that the first 3 hours are the rules for great tzaddikim. They have a much tougher life. Hashem is much more strict with them because they're much greater people. One little iota, one little deviation, and boom. Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he do? He hit the rock. You're not going into Eretz Yisrael. Fair. He didn't hit the rock with each side. I'm not going to listen to Hashem. He thought it was the right thing to do. How do you talk to a rock? You ever talk to a rock? You hit the rock. What language does the rock understand? You hit it. And even that's hard to understand. A rock is not going to give out its water when you hit it. But it happened before, at least once before. It happened in Shmos. So in Bamidbar, when Hashem says to Moshe, hit the rock, take your staff. Take your staff. Kachas hamata. And hit the rock. What's the mata going to do? What's the mata there for? Obviously to hit. So you can't blame him. I mean, what are you blaming this? He had to have thought. He wasn't. There's a whole bunch of different opinions of what wrong he did. It's so unclear. There are 10 different views as to what was his sin. Rashi is only one of the things. According to Rashi, that he hit the rock is only one of the 10 opinions. It's not. It's so unclear, so ambiguous. But that's the first 3 hours of the day. Hashem judges tzaddikim, and the next 3 hours he judges the rest of the world. Weiter. He stands up from the throne of judgment upon which he was sitting, and it's instead he goes and sits on the throne of mercy, of compassion. So that happens in the second 3 hours of a day. He starts with din, and then he changes. Shlishiot, during the third 3 hour period of a day, Yoshev v'zanat kolam kulo. Then he provides nourishment for the entire world. For whom? From the horns of Ra'amim, from the strongest animals, people, every living thing, to the eggs of lice. Hashem controls everything, and he feeds and gives them what they need. Even these little creatures, tiny little creatures, he cares about them. The last 4 hours, what does he do? He laughs. He amuses himself. Yoshev u'masachek im livyatan. He sits and amuses himself with the livyasam. What's the livyasam? The fish, gigantic fish, a whale. But it doesn't only mean that. It means certain tzaddikim are called a fish. Other tzaddikim are called a wild ox. And there's a competition going on. Who's greater? Rabbi Shimon Yochai, for example, is amongst the tzaddikim that are called Nune Yama, fish of the sea. Their whole existence is covered. Like when people, fish of the things that are in the sea, you don't see. S-E-E. If they're in the sea, you don't see them. They're covered. What kind of tzaddikim are these? They're not in this world. They belong to a different world. They belong to a world that some of them don't even have to do mitzvahs. For example, Rav Shimon Yochai with 12 years. He was in a cave. Didn't knock on Pesach. Didn't hear shofar. How could that be? He didn't have to. He did when he was able to. But the fact that he was able to go 12 years without a mitzvah means that his neshama was from a certain category called Nune Yama. Nune means fish, fish of the sea. And what's the word Leviathan? Comes from the word Levi or Levaya, Melave Malka. What does Melave Malka mean? To escort the queen. Melave. Why was Levi called Levi, the third tribe? Because Leah said, now my husband will be with me. I had 3 children already. I only have 2 hands. So I need my husband to help me with the baby. My husband will be with me more often now that I have 3 children. Levi was the third born. Hapam Yilaveh Ishi Elai. Yilaveh means connect. There are certain tzaddikim that are called Livyatan. They're like fish in the sea, and they're very strongly connected to Hashem. They're in a different world. And fish, they swim very fast. One movement, and they're in the other side. You see a fish in a fish tank? With one jump, they're on the other side. They're very light. They're light, but they have a lot of. They can go very far quickly. Also, birds. Sometimes these tzaddikim are called compared to birds. Birds can fly. They're not very strong, but they can fly. Other tzaddikim are called wild. They're wildly in love with Hashem. They're burning. There's a fiery love. These are the animals like the ox. Ox is very powerful, but it can't move that fast. They're much slower. And the ox has a lot of strength, and it has the quality of elevating the world, refining the world. But these are tzaddikim that are very much in touch with the world. There are tzaddikim that are, like the Arizal was one of them, and Rashbi, were in a different world altogether. They were here, but they weren't here. Like then the Gullus didn't affect them at all, one bit, none one bit. So Hashem is going to have a good time looking at these two groups of tzaddikim and seeing how one is greater than the other, and you're like, wow, like entertainment of competition, a World Series, a Super Bowl, it's interesting. The two best teams are playing. Well, Hashem is getting entertained by seeing this quality and that quality. Who's greater? Depends what you look at. A shur has much more, an ox has more energy, but who's lighter? Who can fly faster? Either birds or fish. They go much faster, extremely fast, but they're lighter. So there's tzaddikim that are not in this world. They're like souls without bodies almost. Even though they have a body, their bodies are like part of their soul. They're not really here. And Hashem enjoys those hours of entertaining himself with those tzaddikim. That's what it really means. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So we have a question here. How can you tell me that Hashem never laughs? Only once and twice when it comes to the goyim. Here we have every day he laughs. At the end of the day, he's very much b'simcha. What's the answer? Yeah, every day he laughs with his creatures, with who he created, but not laughing at them. But there's only one time in history, or two times in history, where Hashem will laugh, mocking the people, mocking the goyim. He won't be laughing with them, enjoying them. He'll be mocking them. It's a big difference. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the answer is very simple. The question you asked was a good question. We see Hashem laughs every day at the end of the day. Im b'riyosav mesachek, he laughs every day with his creatures. The al b'riyosav einay mesachek ela ois hayom bilvad. But about his creatures, against them, on account of the sins that they've committed, he laughs only one day alone. Hashem is not happy when people sin. But there's only one time he will laugh, or two times when he will laugh, and that is when the sukkah is kicked down, or when the goyim take off their tefillin, when they see that Gog and Magog is about to conquer Israel. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. The Gemara questions a statement that God amuses himself with his creatures every day. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Acha says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, you know what? What you said is true, but not since the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Miyom shechorban Beis Hamikdash, from the day the Holy Temple was destroyed, there's no laughter. He doesn't laugh anymore. And how do we know this? Before clarifying its question, how the Gemara provides the source, how do we know that Hashem does not laugh anymore after the Korban? Meaning he does not spend the end of his day amusing himself with his great tzaddikim. That stopped after the Korban, and we no longer let Kaschok. From where do we know that he no longer laughs after the destruction? The Gemara brings a possible source and immediately repudiates it. What's the source? Source of a pasuk in Yeshaya, Perek Beis. If you're going to tell me it's the pasuk about Yikra Hashem Elokim Tzvaot on the day of the Korban Beis Hamikdash, Hashem is going to call for mourning. Livchi ulamispe. We should all cry. We should eulogize. Ula korcha. Korcha means boldness. A person is really, a person is in a terrible suffering and pain. You tear out your hair. So Hashem is saying this day, the day of the Korban, should be considered a very sad day. So we see that there's no more laughter. So the Gemara says, okay, on that very day, yes, the very day of the Beis Hamikdash destruction, I understand God does no longer, have a playful time. But maybe only that day. How do you know that from since then until today he doesn't laugh? Perhaps it was only for that day that Hashem called for mourning. And on the next final page, and no more. The verse does not prove that laughter ceases permanently. Only that one day. And the Gemara brings another. I'm going to skip the next piece over here. There's a verse from Tehillim which the Gemara brings where Hashem says, "I'm not going to forget Yerushalayim. I'm not going to forget Yerushalayim. It will always be on my mind. What happened to Yerushalayim? That sounds like that from here on Hashem is not going to. He's going to be in a state of remembering the Korban. So the Gemara says maybe he won't forget about the Korban. Doesn't mean he's not going to have any symptoms. Won't be smiling. So continue further on the third paragraph. The fourth, the paragraph beginning with the words the Gemara concludes. Rather, the source from this verse, I have long kept silent. Hashem says, this is a pasuk in Yeshaya also. Rather, the source is from this verse. How do I know that Hashem will not smile or laugh anymore since the Korban? I have long kept silent. Hashem says, I have kept silent. I have been still. I have restrained myself from any happiness. Okay. Now the Gemara asks, "Berevi is my oven." What does Hashem do in the final hours of the day? Listen to this. Yosef umalamed u'b'tinoike shel beis rabban Torah shenemas miyar l'dei miyaven. He sits and teaches the school children, and Rashi says school children who never got a chance to live, children who die young, so their souls are special. These are children who never sinned, and sometimes, for whatever reason, Hashem takes them away. Can't understand why, but He doesn't take them away. He learns with them and teaches them Torah, and rewards them. So that's what He does. Instead of occupying Himself with the Leviathan and Tzaddikim, the equivalent of Tzaddikim today are little children who pass away young. Esmi Yeridea, to whom shall one teach knowledge? To whom does one explain a message? To those who wean from mother's milk. They just got off their mother's milk, removed from her breast. They're little babies, mamish, tiny little kinderlock. And they pass away for whatever reason. Hashem occupies Himself with them. With me Yeridea, to whom does God teach knowledge? Ulami Yavin Shmua, to whom does He explain a message? This is the pasuk in Tehillim. L'gemulei chalav, I'm sorry, in Yeshaya. L'gemulei chalav means gemulei mei chalav, those who are weaned, who grow out of being nursed from their mother and removed from the breast. They no longer, they're like 2 years old. And they're no longer feeding off their mother, but they're babies. So the Gemara asks, and initially, before the destruction of the temple, when Hashem was busy doing something else, who teach these children? Who would teach these school children? The Gemara answers, it's a certain malach that does Hashem shlichus. He's called Matatrain. It's a long story about him, and no time for that today. And if you want, if you prefer, but say that God did both, not His angel. I'm sorry. If you prefer, it could be God does both. He amuses Himself with His tzaddikim and with the baby, with the little children. He amuses Himself with the little yasan, and simultaneously teaches His school children Torah. Does both. Thus far, the Gemara has discussed God's schedule, so to speak, during the day. The Gemara now inquires, what's His schedule at night? What does God do at night? If you prefer, same schedule as the daytime. Just follows the same pattern. Don't forget, the world is, well, it's daytime here, it's nighttime in Australia. It's nighttime in Australia, it's daytime here. So it depends which part of the world. So it could be that Hashem is doing the same thing, or He's providing for the next day. At night, people don't work, but He's providing for people who work during the next day. Here's a wild one. What is Hashem doing at night? He rides upon His fast kerub, whatever that means, and flies among 18,000 worlds. Shenemar, and the Gemara brings a pasuk to prove that. And then the Gemara concludes, the third answer, if you prefer, it could be that He's sitting and listening to the songs of the malachim, of the angels, and the Jewish people who are learning, like King David, who also got up in the middle of the night and also sang praises to Hashem. And Hashem listens to the praises of tzaddikim and angels during the final hours of the night. Okay, this is the end of the Gemara. I want to tell you a little story I just heard on Shabbos. And if we had a Shabbos Kiddush in Shul, and a shliach from Sharon, Massachusetts, Rabbi Volosov, his name is, told the story. His wife, was involved in the school, and she needed a babysitter. They hired her. They found a babysitter. Didn't think she was Jewish. Her name is Tina. Not a very Jewish name, because Tina usually comes from Christina. Her name was Tina, 15-year-old girl. And Tina never told, we didn't think she was Jewish. She didn't seem like she was Jewish. She was working with babysitting. We found out later she wasn't a dropout from school. She was expelled from school. She was really doing naughty things, a lot of things that deserved to be expelled. Her mother was also a little bit nuts. Found her a job to do babysitting. So she was hired as a babysitter. I think the Jewish Federation over there is the one that got her for babysitting. And they didn't think she was Jewish. She didn't look too Jewish. Time went on. Rabbi Volosov, with the shliach, just lost the son of his 43-year-old son, 30. And she hears, hey, I know what he's doing. That's the Torah reading. You're Jewish? Of course I'm Jewish. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I used to go to conservative Reform temple. I would also, try it out. And I used to also try to read it from the Torah. Okay? Um, I was a very, very troubled child and I had a mother who was nuts. We find out later that her mother was not really Jewish. Her mother's father was Jewish, and her mother thought she was Jewish, and therefore she thought she was Jewish, but she wasn't. So she needed to go through conversion. Oh, and she she converted. And then there was a problem. They were trying to make a car of her, and they succeeded, but they needed a seminary. She was 18 now. 2 years later, 18, and looking for a seminary, and Montreal Seminary refused to take her in. She doesn't know enough. We can't take her into it. She won't. She can't be integrated with the rest of the girls there. She's a beginner. Well, the Wolosoff decided, we'll adopt her, and we'll teach her everything in 2 years. We did that, and she was like, she changed drastically. To make a long story short, very late, just a quick. He lost contact with her for many, after the years she left, he lost contact with her. She got married. She sent him an invitation, thanking him for all that they did for her. To bar mitzvah of their children, one of their children. We have 10 children, by the way, and our first bar mitzvah, a boy, I guess, the first one, the bar mitzvah of a boy. We're inviting you for the bar mitzvah. They sent a letter from. They were living in Israel then. They couldn't go, but they were invited. And you find out later on that they married off. They had years later. She let them know she has 12 children. She's married off 9 of her children. She has now, and they live like you can't believe it. She was never from. It's impossible. They're like real, heavy Lubavitchers, full force, 100%. Living in Israel, 12 children, all Chassidish children, every one of them, and they have grandchildren, and they've had the first or second great grandchild. This comes from a nobody, from a girl expelled from school, from public school, knows nothing, and look what happened. Look what one little act can change a person's life. She's a great grandmother now of a generation. Generation, so amazing. You put an effort, you adopt her. This is what you get in return. And he's such a Chassidish guy. It's unbelievable. Humble, brain, very smart, extremely smart. I was chusm, he just to listen to him brain talk. And he's so warm and so humble, so loving. We did. It's the Rebbe who did this. We just didn't get into his way. It's the Rebbe. That's it. Beautiful to hear that. I have some more stories, but it's like, so have a wonderful Shabbos.
Rabbi Greenberg, it's Simcha. Can you hear me?
If you can send for your address.
I don't have her. I have her. What's it called? We have her. What's up?
Just need your address.
1485.
1485.
Street.
Thank you.
Second house is the brownstone walk in. Brownstone walk in.
Yeah, the girls were bringing.
Oh, okay. 1485. And
Thank you.
It's not the door. It's the door to the left. Two doors.
1485. Thank you. Thank you.
The real customer, it's not going. But only like, even for the big kids, but there wasn't, but you're still have like your self calls, if you're like, I'm doing this, like, hey, by the way, there's a Cheshvan. If you go on, you go to the. 9,000 people. It's all good. I was actually, yeah. I think What are you guys eating today? I'm eating inbound. Sitting on a friend. Here's a very cute. What about you, Joking?